Welcome to Unapologetically Yours, a podcast where we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationships and connection to business and belief systems. Because in a world where we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically. Hello, welcome to the latest episode of the Unapologetically Yours podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I am feeling so happy right now to have my friend, mentor, soul sister, longtime UT collegiate grad. How do we want to talk about that? We'll figure it out. But anyway, I have Meg Sylvester here today with me. She's made a huge impact in my life and has helped in ways she probably couldn't have imagined. And I know that she's on her own journey, and having her here today is a treat. So welcome, Meg.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Meg and I originally met in college at University of Tennessee, and I really liked her. She really liked me, and we stayed friends on social media, and we were doing vastly different things. So watching her go from corporate America to becoming a Zumba instructor to taking on this role as a spiritual leader in Austin was so enticing to me for so many reasons, because she would drop these nuggets that were transformative for me. And so I watched her journey with delight. And anyway, Meg, I would love to hear directly from you what you're up to these days and a little bit about you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, my journey since corporate America, and just to give you a little bit of background, I was a director of sales and marketing for a healthcare company. I was one of, if not the youngest person in the executive team. I reported directly to a CEO. And so from the outside looking in, I was checking all the boxes. I was doing it. I was being a real life adult, driving a fancy car, wearing the fancy clothes to work. And I loved the people I worked with. The work that I was doing, I just kept getting promoted. I was making great money. But there was that nagging, gnawing sensation that this isn't it. This isn't it. And am I allowed? Can I give myself permission to think bigger, to step into the unknown, even though things are good, even though I'm happy? Do I have the right to say, but I want more? And the thing that led me to finally say, yes, I want more, and yes, I can do it, was an SOS from my body. So I was, working, making the money, getting the bonuses, managing a team. And my body was like, no, ma'am. I started getting migraines. I all of a sudden was dealing with chronic cystic, really painful acne. I went on antidepressants, nothing wrong with that. But it was like, okay, what's going on? All the boxes are checked. I'm living the life. I'm living the dream. And yet my body is screaming at me, and I feel unsatiated. And I can't tell you why. I can't justify, I can't validate or explain why I feel unfulfilled. And so I read a book. I had gone to all these doctors, and the doctors were like, here, take this pill for your migraine, take this pill for this. At one point I thought I had a brain tumor. And so I went and got scans, and they were like, no, you're good. And nothing was working. And then I was given a book by a family member who has celiac disease, which is a gluten intolerance. And the book was all about what you eat impacts how you feel, and being a Southern girl, that just really wasn't part of the conversation growing up. And when I say that out loud, what you eat impacts how you feel, it's duh. But at the time, I was just so used to giving all of my power away to an authority and being like, hey, tell me what to do. Even when it came down to my quote unquote purpose or finding myself, like maybe if I get on monster.com or, whatever the latest job board is, I will find myself in the name of a job, And so this book was one of the first times in my life that I felt like, oh my God, like I can have the power. Like I can start making decisions that immediately impact how I feel and how I show up in the world. And so my body started responding to these empowered decisions that I was making, which led to a spontaneous spiritual awakening. I remember sitting in my daughter Ruby's nursery, and I felt this like surge go up my spine. And later that night, I had a dream, and I haven't had a dream like this since. But it was a man's voice, or a masculine voice, speaking in my ear over and over again, saying, "You must discover your ninth chakra," like over and over again. And I remember the next morning I woke up on Facebook and I was like, does anybody know what the ninth chakra is? Like, I didn't even know how to spell chakra. I used an SH instead of a CH. Like, I was like, and people were like, no, that's not, there's like 7, and I was like, nah, like some man told me there was 9 and I need to discover it. So I went on this whole like journey, and, there's several different maps of like the energetic systems. And I finally found.
I'm just laughing for a second because I could probably like scroll back through Facebook and find that post. Maybe I commented on it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Okay.
Yeah. And then, and so then I like came across some text that felt very true. And it was like the ninth chakra represents, it's the seat of the soul. It's like the karmic blueprint, and all of your gifts and your essence combined in this lifetime and all lifetimes. And it's sharing that essence, not a job or a role like being a mother or a marketing executive, or it's your essence. And so I was being beckoned to come home to my like essence. Who am I? Stop trying to put a label or a title on anything and just like connect to this tone that's within you. And that's what you're meant to do. So that is how I got started in all of this.
It's so amazing. I mean, so many things that you said there, like just that feeling of like, am I allowed to think bigger? Do I have the right? Especially when you're living a life where like you check the boxes that society has served us, that this is the way. Like even thinking back to like, okay, you go to college, you do the thing, you get the job, you get promoted, you work with the C-suite, and all of those bragging rights coming with it. And then knowing that it doesn't feel right, that no, it's not enough. And just,
yeah. For some people, that is the thing. Like I want to be very clear that working in corporate America is not bad or not unspiritual. Like we need good people in corporate America sharing and shining their light. For me, corporate America was not the place where I was meant to be in order to really shine and expand and share my message and my essence. So I think there's this thing that happens when someone goes through a spiritual awakening. It's like spiritual awakening, leave corporate, start business, and that's great. That's great. That's what I did. That's a lot of what my colleagues have done, but it also doesn't have to be that way.
But it's more the thing of like, even less that the circumstances are right or wrong. It's identifying that it's right or wrong for you and listening to it and separating yourself from the expectations and knowing that, okay, I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to tune in and I'm going to understand, is this the problem? Is it what I'm eating? Yes or no? Is that going to help me feel better? And then once you can answer that question, kind of moving on to the next thing. Okay. Is it where I'm spending my time? And those clues that our body give us and our mind give us about like what lights us up. And so following those little breadcrumbs to get to the place that works for you, not necessarily being driven by the things that work for someone else. And giving us all the space to what you said, like what works for you, what feels true to you. Giving yourself the space to show up in that way as kind of a whole person.
Yeah. And giving yourself permission and having the courage to forge your own path. And oftentimes, so I switched majors, I don't know, 10 times in college. And was
that a sign of what was to come in life for you?
Multi-passionate. But I think I had such a hard time finding what I wanted to do because it didn't exist. Like I was meant to forge my own path. And while there are people who exist as expanders and who inspire me, there's nobody in the world doing exactly what I'm doing. And there's no template for me to copy. And the same is true for you. And the same is true for you, whoever's listening. Like there's expanders and there's people who can inspire, but there's not an exact template. There's not. And sorry, it makes it a little bit harder.
Right. And I think that what you said early on about how this book that was about celiac, which I don't know if you have or don't have, but just that gave you the clue to have agency over the choices that you make and the life that you're living. And I think that flipping that switch to say like, actually, you get to decide. Actually, I get to decide what makes me happy and what lights me up. And I think that like there's a sort of a two-part of this equation. It's like one, accepting that within ourselves, which is a huge part of the healing journey, but really it's a journey of just connection and sense of self. And then also recognizing and appreciating that in other people when they're living their truth and giving people space to create their own template and knowing that we aren't all cookie cutters of one another.
And what's really hard is when our kids aren't designed for our template, you know, like they have their own and it's like, oh, wait, I got to step back. I cannot force I can share my perspectives and guide and shepherd them with my perspectives, but like she's got a different template, you know, and that like that's hard. But I think going back to what you were just saying, I think claiming agency over our own path and moving out of victimhood is one of the scariest parts of growth. And really, one of the big reasons is what if I follow my curiosity and I follow my happiness and I'm still not happy? I don't have anyone to blame but myself.
Oh, oof.
And first, you know, there's never any blame, but when we're so conditioned to live in that disempowered victim, you know, mentality, it's easier to blame, you know, or to point fingers and say, well, you know, that's because he or she,
circumstances, this, right, attributing it to someone else.
Yeah. But when you're living a liberated and empowered life, it's you, you know, and you've got to take responsibility. And I have found myself, even in recent years, even in past months, trying to sabotage a moment of happiness or like an almost happiness, because it meant that I was stepping into like my full vision. And then that fear, that mean girl in my head was like, yeah, but what if it doesn't work? So like, let's just pull it back. So that way, like, you know, like if it didn't work, then you can't blame yourself. So let's just like pull back. And I have to be like, hang on. No, Like, no, I'm going to go for it. And that feels scary. It feels scary. And it doesn't mean you're blocked or broken. It means you're human and you are hardwired for survival. And that mean girl voice might always be there. And that's okay. It's learning how to cultivate a relationship with that critic, with that mean girl, and be like, hey, I hear you. Thank you so much for trying to keep me safe. But like, no thanks.
I feel that very much. And I think that what is so interesting to me is thinking about like, so yes, there is that fear of being able to take agency. There's fear of what will happen if you don't have anyone else to blame but yourself. But there's also so much freedom in that because it stops becoming about pointing fingers or anything. It's you get to surrender to what feels right and have that full responsibility. And it's I actually feel like it's a much lighter load once you kind of get through some of the muck because you're not as burdened by the things you can't control. You get to focus only on the things that you can control. Like I can't control who's talking shit about me. I can't control how any of that. But what I can control is how I show up in the world. And what I can control is how I'm spending my time and what I'm doing, how I'm loving my kids and how I'm showing up and what breadcrumbs I'm leaving for myself. So, and I think about you and the impact that you have made on so many people's lives by looking into that ninth chakra. And I'm so grateful for it.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. I had a big revelation when I stopped trying to box myself in of like, okay, well, now that I'm a spiritual entrepreneur, like what's my title? What's my role? What am I doing? and just realized and acknowledged and accepted that my main gig given to me by the powers that be is to lead an inspiring life and inspire others to do the same. That's it. And like, cool. Okay. Like, assignment
that's
received.
A pretty fucking cool job title. Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Got it.
I know what to do from here.
Okey
Just be
dokey.
myself and
Okey
have
dokey.
fun.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so one of the big things with that is opening up and softening to my inherent nature, to my inherent rhythms. And a big thing has been not only accepting myself as a multi-passionate, but celebrating my multi-passionate ways.
So tell me, what does it mean? What is a multi-passionate entrepreneur?
So there are some people who are hardwired and they're really good at like, I want to do one thing and I want to do it well. For example, my little brother, he came out of the womb and was like, I'm going to be an attorney and I'm going to do it well. And by golly, he has done it. And he just, focused and like, one day I was like, I'm going to be a ballerina and I want to be an orthopedic surgeon and I want to be this and an anthropologist and Indiana Jones and and as a multi-passionate, similar to how we've been conditioned, the world society tells us that be an extrovert, extroverted tendencies, the extroverted nature is the optimal. And if you're introverted, try to be more extroverted, which isn't true, right? And I feel the same thing has happened with multi-passionates. The world, the society that we're living in values kind of the one track. I'm going to do this one thing and I'm going to do it well. And the world doesn't know what to do with a multi-passionate, but both are good and wonderful. But many of us as multi-passionates have been convinced that we're broken, that there's something wrong with us. Why can't I just do one thing and do it well? Why can't I settle on the one thing and do it well? But right. You have superpowers. So a multi-passionate is someone who is lit up by a multitude, like just wants to like, I think of it as like, a one track person is like, I have this one meal and I'm going to eat it and it's going to be delicious. Whereas a multi-passionate is like, oh, can I take a bite of yours? And can I take a bite of yours? And like tapas. The world is like our tapas table, and we're designed to follow our curiosity and to engage in different passions and hobbies that feed us for different reasons, that are just satiating for our soul. And the more we allow ourselves to explore and then allow certain hobbies and passions to fizzle out and not guilt ourselves for, okay, I was interested in painting and I stopped before I became Picasso. And so now I suck and I'm terrible. We have to allow those passions to bloom and blossom. And then if we feel done with them, we feel done with them. I will say one little tool that I've given myself, because where I got into feelings of guilt around being a multi-passionate was money and spending a lot of money on new passions and hobbies. And then they fizzled out. And now
wait, do you mean like going to the art store and spending $350 on oil paints and
yeah, and then using them once?
This is you're looking at a multi-passionate.
Yeah.
We know this. But go ahead.
And so when I surrender to this new thing that's calling me, let's go with painting, I give myself a budget for 3 months. And then after the 3 months, if it's still sticking around, I expand that budget a little more. And that just for me, sure. Because the money was the one part that I was like, this is getting out of control, especially when your passions and hobbies involve equipment and gear, So give yourself a budget. If it's still around, go for the bigger gear, but like give yourself permission to explore, but like, do it budget friendly for this first couple of months.
Well, I think that you raised, just two things. Like one, how we perceive people who have a variety of interests is unreliable sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is true or flighty or flaky or all of those things.
It's our superpower.
That what I found
it's magnetic.
It's our superpower to explore the world, learn a little about a lot of things or a lot about a few things. And then like what I'm always surprised at is how the knowledge that I pick up along the way comes back to serve me in my greater purpose. And so this
it's
and
all
I think that's
connected.
Really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But even more, like I think a lot about the backyard musician and how sad I am that I have found, maybe it's just in the circles that I run in, where there's fewer people than there seem to used to be who are just like strumming on a guitar and being okay with being imperfect and, playing their 20 song catalog of John Denver and Van Morrison and just for the delight of the people around them, not worried about someone saying like, oh, you're going to get a record deal. Or like, I like to say, like, I was trained as a musician growing up. Like I played the piano, guitar, sang, and I did that until I went to college. And then after that, people were like, well, what are you going to do with it? Are you Beyonce? And I was like, well, I don't know. I'm pretty fucking good at karaoke. But had I had a little bit more space, and that's actually debatable, but had I had a little bit more space to just like, hey, I get to just be in this hobby, and this is my hobby, and this is what I do.
It doesn't have to result in anything other than lighting you
well,
up
that's
and
the
feeling
conditioning
good.
of the broad capitalism and productivity but taking this back a little bit to, so as you have explored some of these nudges and urges, you have unlocked so many different areas of expertise from Kundalini yoga, sound healing, meditation, coordinating retreats, then developing a curriculum for other people to coordinate retreats. It's all really, really amazing. And one of the things that I want to check in on is how attending the Lotus Sisterhood retreat catapulted me in like forwards and backwards and everywhere, like all at the same time. One, it was like a return home. And then it was also likely the foundation for my future. And so none of those things would have been unlocked had you not had the courage to tug at the strings and the courage to, So, thank you.
Yeah. And I really feel like when I'm being called to a modality or a passion or, something like that, because I know I'm meant to lead an inspiring life and inspire others to do the same, it's like I'm being magnetized towards it for a reason. And then when I can integrate it and then share it with others as a thing that's like, this really helped me and I want to share it with you. I want to create an experience for you to have your own experience by using this tool. And I think the more we can experience a variety of tools, it just helps us to get into all those like nooks and crannies, you know, and playing with all the different senses. And it feels so good to me to be able to share like a plethora of modalities just to get into the mind, to get into the body, to get into the somatic and the spirit. And it's who I am. And as an entrepreneur, as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, it really helped me to say, I'm not a coach. I'm not a Kundalini teacher. I'm not a retreat facilitator. I'm not this, or this. I'm Meg. I'm me. And I offer these things. But the umbrella over all of these different things is me. Whether or not they seem related or completely not, they are, because the essence of me is what's holding them all together and offering them to someone or to a group of people. And now it's so fun because I'm able to really tap into my intuition and say, which tool in my toolbox would be right for the energy that I want to move right now, you know? And so it's so satiating to have all of that, you know, and to also say, I don't need to be an expert on all of these things. I just need it to be integrated so that I can share it with people who then can experience it themselves while keeping people safe.
Exactly.
You know, like people are going to be safe. They're going to be held. It's going to be in integrity and responsibility. But like, I have permission to explore, to dabble, to share, you know, and it's that for me is such a more satiating life than the do one thing and do it well. Whereas the do one thing and do it well is way more satiating and way more grounded than the multi-passionate lifestyle for someone else. And that's okay.
Right. Well, also the people who maybe are on a more linear path would be the ones who might enjoy what you're creating and benefit from and bring back to their lives too. So there's so many ways to show up at the dance. And I think that that's what's so inspiring, is just making sure like, hey, check in with yourself to make sure you're showing up at the dance the way that you want to, not the way that someone told you to show up. And that's so important. And you said the word, like, you have permission. And I think about permission in terms of like I sort of woke up one day and was like, hey, like no one's coming to fix this. No one's going to give me permission to to go and do these things or create this life that I want. So you give yourself permission. Yeah. And that is super and that goes back to that agency of saying like, actually, I can. There is no one who's going to show up one day and be like, oh, now it's your turn to go claim the life you want. Now it's your turn to go be happy. It's like, there is no magical line that we're waiting in. Yeah. You just go do it.
Do it.
Explore it. Unpack it. Exactly.
I think as multi-passionates, our biggest superpower is the capacity to follow and to surrender to our curiosity. It's magic. It really is magic. You never know. You never know.
I think about, so when I guess it was 2021, maybe, when I saw you first post about the Lotus Sisterhood retreat in Tulum. And I had been following along, getting little sprinkles of Meg and tidbits and again, like cheering on your journey. But there were things that you had said that resonated with me. And then as soon as I saw that post, I was like, well, this makes no sense. I'm going. And I sent you some questions and I booked the tent, the glamping tent on the beach, and then showed up showed up for the retreat with 13 other women, women who I love and hold dear. And I remember like I was coming fresh off of a miscarriage, fresh off of just like pandemic burnout from running my company Yakety Yak, and had been kind of just swallowing spoonfuls of disempowerment for a decade, and just sort of same thing. Like my story was that I had done all the things, checked all the boxes, had fulfilled the proverbial checklist, and just knew like this. I had this feeling in my heart and in my chest, this isn't right. And I called it like my Jumanji drum. Just something saying like, this isn't it. And it was getting louder and things were getting harder as the universe was being like, fuck, bitch, pay attention. Like, we're trying to show you something different. And not that that's how the universe talked to me, but that's eventually how I needed it to talk to me.
Pay attention. Yeah.
And I remember just, like I said, like showing up totally worse for wear, not having any idea what to expect. Had never done, I'd always loved yoga, but like wasn't a yogi, was disconnected from my body, disconnected from even my own feelings. And I cried for 3 days straight.
You sure did. The emotions were like, joy. Finally, I can come out.
It did. It felt like coming home. And I think that was like all of the things that you had cultivated. One, like the relationships that you'd nurtured by planting seeds, all sprouted into women who would show up on this path, and each of them bringing their own gifts and magic to this retreat experience. And then the gifts that you have cultivated, like Kundalini yoga and sound healing, and also just and gateless writing. Oh my God, which I want to hear more about. But hear you share more about. But we did a Temazcal Temazcal tent, and the space that you held for us as Meg was so deeply transformative because it allowed me to be like, okay, I'm going to access these tools and connect back to myself, figure out. Like I had visions there of, during breath work, of a retreat because I knew, like you did, that these modalities all combined are things that need to come to the people in my life. And I knew that I need to create an experience where I could bring these modalities to the people in my life. And I saw a vision of a retreat. I heard the voices of my grandmothers. And this wasn't from being on psychedelics. This was because I just gave myself permission to tap in to what my body, mind, soul, spirit were telling me.
And to listen.
And it was amazing.
And to believe instead of pushing it right down.
To listen.
Yeah.
And trust. Listen, believe, trust. All of it. It wasn't easy. There was one point, I think it was the first night, my middle son I think he slept with me most nights since he was born. We snuggle. And I remember being in this like hot, musty tent. I had taken too much luggage because I wasn't sure what to bring and didn't trust what the experience was going to be. Like dragged this wheelie suitcase down through the sand. Had to like, if I wanted to like walk up to, the bathroom was like pretty far away in nighttime. We were in the jungle and I was like, are there vipers? Are there jaguars? Like, I don't know. And I remember laying there in the dark and I shined my flashlight around and there was a little cockroach on my table, and then it started running in circles around the table. Then I had to drag it out while not bumping my head. And then I was like, well, I have to pee. I had this like romper on and then peed in the sand because I didn't want to walk up to the bathroom in the dark because I didn't know if there was vipers. And then the wind blew and then I peed and my romper, then the sand got on my romper and stuck. And like, it was just this whole thing. But then I cried myself to sleep, not out of sadness that I was there, but just I needed to release so much grief that I was carrying from the pandemic, from miscarriage, loss, the weight that I was that I didn't know how to process, and my lack of connection to myself and my purpose. nature was the trigger. Watched the sunrise, pink and beautiful, and it changed my life.
Yeah. And the cool thing about being a facilitator is, you know, when you told me the next morning your experience, I checked in with myself. Is she safe? Is she safe? Yes. Are the bugs up to me? No. This is her experience. This is the experience that she's been given to be able to shift all of that. Of course, I want to make sure she's safe, you know. But other than that, like, as a facilitator, I'm not here to micromanage every person's experience. And I have to have such deep levels of trust with the universe that each person is here to have their own experience. And I should not mess with it, you know? So you've got to, as a facilitator, as an entrepreneur, as someone holding space for someone's transformation, to be okay with things getting messy. In plant medicine ceremonies, you know, they say if someone's going through a big thing, like if they're crying, don't go up and comfort them. Let that move through, because on the other side of that may be a huge transformation, a huge release. And so as someone holding space for others, I have to be okay with that, you know, with the mess and with the bugs and with the, again, making sure someone's safety is really being held, but being confident and comfortable enough in the process to know I can back up. So you told me that and I was like, oh yeah, that sounds big. That was a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's like, this is night one, baby.
Right.
We got a few more to go.
We're in the juggle. Bugs aren't going anywhere. Yeah.
Right. It's going to be fine. And it was more than fine. It was so deeply expansive. And I think the thing that was so interesting about it too is that like you, always been a community builder, always been someone who likes to create, bring people together, think outside of the box. And I just wasn't allowing myself the space to do that. Uh-huh. But after that died there. Uh-huh. And then fast forward a couple of years later and you joined me and we created a retreat experience in Northern Michigan for the women in my life.
And it was amazing.
It was amazing. My gosh. So some of the things that it's really, two parts. One, the Northern Michigan vista of just being in that air on that pretty. Water in that location. It is so beautiful. And for me, I feel like home. It feels like home there. And the environment, the earth and the water and everything just holds such space in the ambiance alone. But then also knowing that anytime a retreat container is created, that each individual person who decides to be there brings their essence, brings their magic, and that it's a collective energy. It's not about me or you. It's circular. Who comes together. And exactly, it's circular. It's Aquarian. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. And it's been so satiating and so rewarding to create experiences based off of trust and circular leadership rather than hierarchical, of like, I am the leader, I am the boss, I have it figured out, and I'm going to show you how you should shape your life so that it looks like mine. Like, no, like we are done with that. And it's just been so much more empowering to look to every person on the retreat and be like, she has something beautiful to say. She has something wise to say. Her experience, her vulnerability is going to empower all of us. We all see each other and one another's stories. And yes, I'm facilitating. I have some tools. I'm going to hold some space for you, but your experience is the biggest teacher. Your experience in the breath work, your experience with eating this delicious food, your experience with that conversation you have with another woman during free time. Like, it's all magic. And yeah, each person that says yes to a retreat, it's like their story, their essence, even if they show up and they're like, I don't want to be here, and they feel angry about it, and then they soften, that experience is meant to be on the retreat too, you know? And it's just, like, I know that's how the world used to be, women coming together in circle and just loving each other, coming together with the intention of healing, of love, of joy, of being in the practice of authenticity, and being able to create these events to bring that like ancient magic back is so rewarding. I love it so much. And I'm like honored to do it every time.
It is. So it's interesting to me because one, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. We were meant to show up in circle with one another where we are, and I've actually totally transformed the way that Yakety Yak operates as a result of this mindset. Like, we are no longer a Piscean patriarchal company. We are an Aquarian matriarchal company where we are all in circle, depending on one another, knowing that it doesn't spin unless we are all acknowledging the wisdom of one another and reflecting it. And it doesn't mean that there might not be someone who has a stronger voice or is leading and guiding. There's room for all of that. But the wisdom that we all carry is what needs to be seen, honored, reflected. And honestly, I think it's the future of the world. We have to make some pretty big changes, big and courageous changes for that to happen. But it starts, I think, with each individual person and taking that agency around, like, how do you want to show up in your life? Do you want to access these tools that will give you hints about how to navigate what's next, how to live in your passion, power, purpose? And more than that, it doesn't all have to be like productive and this is for an end game and all of this. It can just be like, I just want to fucking be happy.
Right.
So how do I do
present?
that?
And right
how
now,
do I do that?
I want to paint.
How do I be present?
And right now, I want to move my hips. And right now, I want to eat this piece of chocolate. And right now, I want to do nothing. And I want to pet my dog. And that's it. And it doesn't have to lead to something.
Well, it's been interesting too, like seeing what you awakened in me was really sort of the birth of a whole new business through, it's just like AshleyDLogan.com. I don't have a business name. Maybe one day I will.
I don't either.
But
Meg Sylvester. Yeah.
Hey, Meg. Yeah. And it's about creating those safe spaces for people to connect back with themselves, like their inner child and the voice that makes them happy, the things that make them happy, and to learn how to sort of manage the expectations of the world by combining those full body practices, because you are a whole ass person. So somatic, spiritual, connection with nature, all of those elements that make just the biggest difference in the world.
And just like being loved on, like having women, we enter into the retreat space with the intention of reflecting each other's power, of each other's strength and beauty. And that becomes kind of the container of the retreat, of all the retreats that I facilitate. And it's incredibly powerful and groundbreaking what can happen when you're just in a circle of women who are committed to just reflecting each other's beauty instead of trying to suggest and fix and advise. And it's like, it's so good. It's so good. No words.
Yes, exactly. Well, so you have evolved a lot over the last couple of years as well. I love being I don't want to even say it like along for the ride. I just like, I love observing your ongoing metamorphosis, because that is what makes you you. That's how you regenerate. That's how you lead. That's how you inspire. That's how you stop people in their tracks. And not and I see you actively checking in with yourself. Like, does this feel good? Does it make sense for me to promote these deep healing practices? Does it make sense for me to focus on creative expression and then embodying it? So tell me a little bit about who you are today and how you're showing up in the world, and how it's, and maybe not how it's evolved, but it's all been part of your story.
So people ask me about this snake tattoo that I have, and really, I feel like it's such a representation of who I am, because I am a skin shedder. Doesn't sound sexy, but that's
You're
who
a real
I am.
skin shedder, Meg.
I'm a real skin shedder. That is my inherent
This
nature.
sounds like something we would whisper to each other while like barfing behind a dumpster in college outside of a bar. Oh, how
Maybe
life has
I did.
changed.
Maybe
You're
I
a real
did.
skin shedder.
But, you know, I'm in this practice. So one of the things that I've been committing to doing right now is paying attention to my language and knowing that there is a time for the deep healing work, and there's a time for integration. And I'm currently in integration, and I am in the practice instead of the work of holding space and focusing on pleasure and play and lightheartedness. That doesn't mean I'm bypassing the hard stuff, but I'm doing it through the lens of pleasure. Pleasure is my ally right now. And something I've read recently that really struck me is that many people think that the absence of pleasure is pain, but pain and pleasure exist along the same spectrum. The absence of pleasure is a need to seek external power. But when we are in pleasure, when we are living through that lens, our power is, we don't need to seek it within us, because being in pleasure and being in joy and being in play and lightheartedness, that is our power. And for a long time, I was shut down to physical pleasure and intimacy, both self-pleasure and pleasure with my partner. And a lot of that occurred after my spiritual awakening, because all of a sudden I became too good for hedonistic, like primal pleasure. I became too spiritual, and I denied myself that, which is really bizarre. No one told me to. It was just this ego. It was very ego of like, how pure, how spiritual can I be? And I stopped listening to like fun music that like, you know, was playful and fun, like Nicki Minaj. You know, I stopped. I like only started listening.
Brings other boys to the yard.
You know, only started listening to like conscious music and mantra, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like even stopped wearing color, started wearing like only white. But it was almost like I needed to go through a full recalibration. So I'm not ashamed. I'm not blaming. I'm not saying that was bad. I'm saying, cool, that was part of my journey to recalibrate, you know, to kind of drop all these patterns and habits and whatever, and come back to this like ground zero. And now coming out of the other side. And I was in the deep work for like 8 years. And I just
had What do you call it, by the way? What is deep work?
Well, my dad died. My dog, like my soul dog, died. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. I had 3 kids, you know, motherhood. Yeah. So there was a lot that was being brought to me that brought me into the energies of sorrow, of pain, of losing trust in my body, of going through burnout, adrenal like crisis. It was just heavy and intense, and necessary, because it helped to soften me. That grief brought me to the depths of my creative wellspring, and I discovered like this poet that lived within me who had such a deep relationship with words that the written word turned into a master healer, and movement became medicine. And it was hard and it was sad. And there were often times I wondered, am I going to be like this forever? Like, did I lose my joy? And so it was beautiful, and I'm so grateful for it. And I then realized, I think I'm becoming addicted to healing, to the work, because it had just become my pattern. You know, like, oh, I'm having a thought, like, oh, let me go and like discover the root of that and how to fix it and how to make myself better. And I just had this moment of being like, the thoughts are going to happen. The tough stuff's going to happen. The eclipses and the retrogrades are going to happen. But I'm okay. I am good enough as is. Yeah. I am not this perfect, enlightened Buddha being. There are facets of that within me. But I'm okay to put down the self-help books, to step away from the 15-step morning routine, to stop obsessing over how to fix myself, and to just be in the pleasure of being myself. And like, that's enough. And I can play, and I can reconnect back to my body, and I can listen to Doja Cat, and I can wear pink sparkles, and I can cuss, and I can eat the Pringles and drink a Diet Coke, and it's going to be okay. And it just feels so integrated and so full. And so now what I'm really stepping into is reclaiming my sexual, sensual, feminine self, and not toning it down, not making my sexuality and my sensuality and my pleasure more palatable, because I am a sexual, sensual woman, and I don't need to hide that. In fact, do you know what I just learned yesterday?
Tell me.
I have almost an exact same birth chart as Marilyn Monroe. I was like, well,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, Marilyn Monroe is one of my icons. And I went through a very deep dive when I was probably maybe 13 or 14 years old with her, and of like reading every biography, every conspiracy theory. I know an awful lot about her and the tragedy that that came to be with her, which will not be your fate. But that is amazing. And I think that just tapping into the fact that like we forget, like the human experience is about play. It is about pleasure. Yeah. That's the best part. That's the
like we have parts of our body that are just meant for pleasure. That's it. To feel good.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
And I mean, I was raised going to Catholic schools, so there's a lot of guilt.
Well, I mean, the problem is well, not just that, but like we have two options when it comes to like even just modern religion. And for so long, it's like Madonna or whore, virgin or whore. And the way that Mary Magdalene was painted, which I know this is not true. She was a priestess. She influenced Jesus in probably ways we'll never understand. But just the fact that there hasn't been room for sacred sexuality, there hasn't been room for play and pleasure. It has even like think about like structured playtime in school. Like you have recess, and it is between this time and this time,
right? And here's what you can do, and here's what you can't. Right.
So I think that actually the way that you are bringing play, pleasure, and layering that upon the healing experience and having that awareness where you can show up. Some days you're going to be, you're going to eat the Pringles, and that doesn't mean that you're a counterfeiter, a fraud. And someday you're going to be screaming Doja Cat, and who, like, my kids know all of the words to. I know.
But you are allowed to be a grounded, whole woman who is mission driven, who is spirit driven, and sexy as fuck. You don't have to choose. You do not. In fact, your raw, feminine, sensual nature is your inherent personal power. And we have been told to shut that shit down because the powers that be knew it was dangerous. And so I'm now on a mission to make sexy accessible. It doesn't, and like right now, I feel like there's this like very hyper sexualized version of sexy. And if you want to like, own your sensuality, then you need to like be either like a tantric priestess, nothing wrong with that, amen to you, or like, be in lingerie all the time and naked and saying the word pussy like nonstop, like nothing wrong with that. But I want to be a bridge. I want to be somebody that's like, hey, you can be sexy at the grocery store. You can be sexy in a t-shirt. Like it's sexy is an inside job, and it is powerful when we give ourselves the permission and the audacity to live in pleasure and lightheartedness. Like it is a superpower. It is magnetic. And we've been taught that, it needs to be hard. We need to suffer. We need to, like be buttoned up. And that is
if we're going to be sexy,
true.
We need to go put on the lingerie and have everything waxed and perfect and all of those things.
Yeah. No.
And
there's nothing wrong with that.
I think that's
one version.
And that's right. If that's, but that's one of the things of like checking in with yourself. What makes you feel sexy? What are you asking yourself the question? I know you and I have gone down a very similar journey with like something very, very simple, getting our nails done. I never got my nails done for a long, long time, and then decided that I wanted to have longer nails so that I could give my kids better back scratches. Like it's something for me. Started doing my nails all the time and love how I feel glancing down at I'm actually in between manicures right now, so I'm not going to show mine, but like I love how it feels. I like how they clack when I type. Me too. Those are the little things. Right. And it's the checking in. Checking in on the things that bring you small bits of joy. Yeah. And I think that the sexiest women are the ones who walk around in the bathing suit with imperfect bodies at the pool. I think the one that's sexy is about it's about job. Being unapologetic. To be honest, it is. It's an inside job. And the other thing that it's about is like when you feel lit up inside, when you're following the breadcrumbs of your life and asking those questions about like how you want to show up in the world. Like even going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, it's hard to be in your pleasure if you are suffering from migraine, if you're ignoring the voice in your head that says that you need to do something different and you're not listening to it. So by following that track, at the little hints that you're getting in your life, that will lead you to the path of being able to access your pleasure, power, fun, joy. And that can show up. Pleasure can show up, and it doesn't have to be
between your legs.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. It doesn't have to be that. It can be just being present in the moment and laughing and connecting with someone. It can be wearing an outfit that, like today, I was like, I am feeling it. I want to be feminine today. So I'm wearing this like super feminine butterfly dress, and that makes me feel great. So then I'm going to be attracting the things in my life, not just sexually, but people, opportunities, creativity, people who are going to help enhance my path because I'm now resonating with them and they know that I'm a safe spot to bring that to.
My favorite, one of my favorite things to say now, when someone says thank you instead of you're welcome, I say it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. and just, you know, like affirming and using that as like my affirmation throughout the day. Like it is my pleasure. In fact, it's one of my favorite things when you go to Costa Rica. So most places when you travel that speak Spanish, your welcome is de nada. Like, oh, it's, you know, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. But in Costa Rica, they say con gusto, like, oh, with pleasure. And I love that. I love it so much. So
they say that in South Africa too, and I love it. Pleasure.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful.
Love it.
Like they even say it's my pleasure. Just pleasure.
Pleasure.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So Meg, tell me, I know there's so many ways, but how are you showing up unapologetically?
Well, I'm owning my sexy. I'm owning it. And I'm not toning it down. I'm proud of it. And I think being proud of your sensuality and sexuality as a woman is, it has been frowned upon or labeled, you know, or wanting to put us in a box. But I'm owning it and I'm not apologizing for it. So it feels good.
I love it. Keep going. Keep sharing.
I will.
As I know that you will, and you're meant to. And we love following along. Where can we find you, darling?
I'm most active on Instagram. I am like the old lady who just started TikTok. I'm just trying to figure out what the fuck's going on there. So you can follow me on TikTok, but
aren't we all?
Come find me on Instagram first. I have a monthly Substack, a free newsletter. It's like just full of joy and tips and links and practices and just, it's like a little treasure box. So you can find me on Substack. The link for Substack is in my bio on Instagram as well. So those are the two biggest places.
Thank you so much for being
pleasure.
Here. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure, darling.
Can't wait to have you back to go deep on all things feminine, and we've got so much more to discuss as always. But today, it's been real. I'm grateful for you, and thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go out, make some mischief in the world, and until then, I'm Ashley, and I'm unapologetically yours.